One thing I've learned, if you don't hold their feet to the fire, everybody gets burned.
Hold on. Before you start waving around that freedom of speech thing, when you're at a crowded movie theater and you scream fire, you better be able to smell smoke. If you come on this radio show and you start saying incandescent things like that, you better have more behind you, pal, than just your thumb. I've been listening to talk radio for years, and one thing I just can't stand is when the host has to, push his way onto people, beat the callers into his way of thinking, extending his ego, or when the callers call in and say something so outrageous and the host lets it go unchallenged. The sign you're on the road to truth is the lack of contradiction. You want to find truth, you just don't simply believe somebody because of their authority or their degree, or you listen to what they say, you test it against reality, and you hold their feet to the fire. And we're live, feet to the fire. I'm your host, James, out the Unchecked Black Knight of Talk Radio, now into year 18. Almost finishing year 18. Starting year 19 in January. Anyway, the title I came up with today was kind of like, here we are now, and where are we going? What's the future? What's the future as of this moment? Referring to what's going on with the, well, basically it's a color revolution in the United States, as so the deep state has exported around the world, so is now coming home to rid themselves of anything populist in Donald Trump or those who follow him. And there it is. If people have been following this, I mean, I'm not going to kind of go over all the stories because everyone who has been following this has been basically been seeing this. But to wrap it up in a nutshell, there is evidence of massive, systemic, and deep voter fraud, both in paper ballots being fraudulently made out, added after the fact, and perhaps fraudulently made up front, too, and mailed, harvested, as well as in the software used to tabulate, so that it ended up giving Joe Biden many millions of votes, several million votes, and taking away from Donald Trump. And Sidney Powell, who is known for her work against corruption. She was a district attorney, U.S. district attorney, and she is now she was representing Flynn against the prosecutorial overreach and abuses that has been being done, and also judicial overreaches in the judge. That's still awaiting its own bizarre story. But she is now on the Trump team, along with Rudy Giuliani, going to prove this fraud. Now, some of the interesting things to add on top of that is the mainstream media, including Fox, with the exception of a couple of the people, the color people there, the what's the word? The political people, the partisan. They're not black and white color. I guess that's what I meant by that. and that's Sean Hannity, and very very small amount by Tucker, kind of surprising. And then there's a bunch by Levin and others. But as far as the news network part of it, along with all the rest of them, not a peep. If it is mentioned at all, it's laughed at real quick and thrown away, which is very odd. They have deemed Biden the winner, even though he's not officially been deemed the winner through the normal channels that normally have been, that other people have gotten winner. When they are the president-elect, it's because they've been certified president-elect. However, they've jumped the gun on this, which is interesting in and of itself. It seems that the media is running cover for this to try and pay no attention to the man behind the curtain type of thing as this goes on. And even as much as today, Sidney Powell, who I deem very sober and serious, was very deadpan and uncategorical. I'll say this, non-categorically, meaning just blatantly saying this in plain language that they will overturn the results in many states because of the proof they have for fraud. And in the two categories I mentioned. So it is very pins and needles. I mean, we thought that, well, at the election, at least we know after, what happened, it's over. Of course, it's not. And technically they have till like early December before has to be certified for the Electoral College to vote. So what I did was I wrote down an item. First put it on Gab, but I wanted to edit it a bit. And apparently I had used up the allotted space. So what I did do was I put it on my website. And also, if you look at the description below of this audio or video, transcribed video, you will see it as well. And I'm going to kind of read it. I'm not a good sight reader, but it sums it up really nice rather than me just kind of babbling on here. And then I can jump off in various parts from there. And I do apologize to the people who aren't in the United States listening to the show, who are, I presume they realize that this is not really only a United States thing, that this will affect world governance. Apparently the cowboys in the United States are one of the few left bucking it. I mean, there's many around the world. You see the protests in Berlin, that was excellent. But they're spurred on, really, I think, by Donald Trump. Even their signs say this. So this is kind of a battle to the death of, Neo standing up to the Matrix. I mean, David and Goliath. I mean, you can go down through all of the archetypes here. And so around the world, I'm sure they realize how important this is. And I've been reading a lot of posts from around the world. But I just want to mention that I am thinking of this in the world sense. And it seems to me that they had pre-planned the fraud via mail-in ballots and tweaking key states' voting software based on their projected needed votes for Trump. Now, this is kind of like as I watched in the rearview mirror and saw what happened. It seems like they had pre-planned this. I mean, they were too confident. Biden wasn't even bothering to campaign. Pelosi comes out with statements like, no matter what happens on Election Day, the 20th, we will be swearing in Joe Biden with a real kind of smile. And they did have a trial run of this in the midterms in 2018 where they took several House seats from in California in particular, who has been Republican for quite a while in these certain areas. And so they are pretty confident. So I think they planned both to have the mail-in ballots, both legitimately prompted, let's say. Also, they sent out mail ballots to everybody. So that means anybody could pick it up and mail it in. So you have the prompting those who probably wouldn't have voted or you're not uninterested to vote. Then those who are just going to fill in ballots and send in fraudulent votes. And then you may have the systematic helping, looking at the voter rolls, and hey, who hasn't voted in a long time, and filling out votes for them. So you have that fraud, and then you have the software. Now, giving Alex Jones credit, in the 2016 election, a lady came forward blackboxvoting.com. I think I'll look it up. But I think that's what it is. She had proof showing how you can skew the voting. You can, in the counting software, you can say, I want to have so many percent for this person, so many for that person, whatever, and it will round off the voting. And the proof was in a kind of embarrassingly obvious voting totals being in decimals. You know, how does a 0.3 person vote? Well, when you round off the votes, you do get decimals. So this has been known. In fact, in recent days, I saw videos people have dug up where, and I'll see if I can put these at the end of the show in the description, where they have. I think it was, gosh, I can't think of her name now. I'm seeing her face, Pocahontas. Anyway, she was talking about the problems with programming the voting. This is them talking about it, 2016. So you have two-prong approach. You have the flooding of the mail-in ballots up front, and then you have the skewing in the software. So they probably programmed it guessing how many they would need to win. Again, this is all my assumption, assertion. It's kind of assertion. It's a theory here. So when the time came, the surprise was that many, many, many people voted. More people voted for Trump than they expected. And so as the night went on, and we saw they didn't bother working on certain states because it was going to go to Trump. They only needed certain ones with numbers. So when it got into the swing states, as they're called, they started to notice that Trump was really far ahead. I'm like, oh no, our skewing isn't working. There's too many votes. So at some point in the night, they stopped for various reasons. Stopped counting the vote first time in my lifetime in like 5 states, all the main swing states: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and so on, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia. They all stopped counting. And then the stories differ. People were told to leave the room, and then they came back and found all these vote boxes were there. There was videos of from phones of people apparently filling out ballots the way they were doing, stuff in the ballots, filling them out. Also in the count, you had many votes for president with nothing else on there. Those, I think, would be the stuffed ballots that they were doing in a hurry. They were just putting down Biden, and leaving the rest of it blank. You also have ones where I think the software got involved, where you have people voting straight ticket Republican yet voting for Biden for president. Now, that probably was the software. So they did this late in the evening and kind of stopped people from counting. They stopped the Republicans from watching the counting on the voting so they wouldn't see any anomalies. All this was done kind of haphazardly. So what I'm saying is, it seems to me there's one pre-planned part of this. Then on the election night, it became evident Trump was receiving way more votes than they had planned, so they had shut down things to give him time to mark up ballots and add them to the box, and then also possibly reprogram some more of the machinery. The latter actions were hurriedly and sloppy, leaving a blinking light of sorts to mark their intervention. If it wasn't for the huge unlooked-for votes for Trump, they might have got away with it. But the first part of it, the former part of it, the first part might have worked. They might have swung enough votes, and it would have been close or whatever, and that would have been it. But because the massive wave of voting, unexpected voters, they had to interject in and sloppily add to it. So this means that both Trump's crash rallies at the end and the determination of many Trump voters, both the originals from 2016 and the recruited in the past 4 years, being the minority numbers rose quite dramatically, and most people continued to do what they were doing. If you voted for Trump in 2016, odds are you're doing it again. So all you did was add more votes to it. So that actually did cause them to go, oh no, oh crap. And then they had to rush to do something very quickly. And of course, when you do things rushing, that's when you make mistakes. That's where problems come out. So, and I put it on their blind power lust addiction or the fear of being exposed in Trump's swamp draining drove them to act recklessly, working together to expose and attempt to overthrow the U.S. government through elaborate voter fraud. Now, in the aftermath, everyone's got to do their part to try to cover. So MSM, big tech, obviously accomplices, are desperately running cover and distraction while the main political players simply wait somewhat helpless to see if the Trump, Giuliani, Powell team can effectively and legally expose them, overturning, perhaps redoing. I'm going to throw it in there, perhaps redoing the election. There might be a redo in certain states. It's possible that the justices or judge and or justices have a lot of options they can run. It's also reasonable to assume programming plans were made for House and Senate seats, and that may come up as well. Now, they did notice that a lot of the House seats were turned over to the Republicans, and I think you'll notice that because the focus was on this pre-programmed and pre-planned voter fraud. But then when the wave of votes came in, they concentrated mostly on the president. This is why you had these tens of thousands of ballots with just Joe Biden on it. So there's still, I think, they may find that this programming and voter fraud does account for some in the House and Senate. So in overturning things, that may be as well. So there's something to think about there. I see two options with a third. The two options being the polar opposite possibilities. You got a fork in the road, and fork one, Trump's contesting of the elections wins, proving massive multi-level fraud, and gains a second term. This may also turn the House, keeping the Senate as the fraud is uncovered. This will unleash the anti-Kraken, and I say anti-Kraken because Sidney Powell has said that she was going to release the Kraken about this attack on exposing a voter fraud. And so I use the term anti-Kraken of the BLM and Antifa as the war gets hot, and they'll become America's insurgents. And it'll get bad. Infrastructure will be affected. There's a lot of plans they've been very busy bees planning this stuff. So Trump brings new people in. You already see that he's got rid of new Pentagon chief and assistants. He brings new people in, ends foreign wars, roots out corruption, jails the corrupt. The medical tyranny is ended as they get rid of Fauci and those people. The wall is finished. Immigration reform is passed. America wins, and China loses. The other option is Trump loses the fraud case and the Senate runoffs, leaving a president, Senate, and House full-blown socialist to add states and SCOTUS judges, sealing their power for the foreseeable future. The Trump supporters will be marked, shunned, or perhaps even rounded up, and the patriots will fight back, and they will become the new American insurgents, using this from Syria and Afghanistan type of outlooks. The medical tyranny expands, the wall is torn down, mass immigration and amnesty, Americans lose, China wins. So as I see it, those are the two, I don't want to say extremes, but those are the two complete results. There's a third, more probable, lackluster, tumultuous mix of the above, none leading to any unity or peace. So the more probable option is that various mix of these things will be. Trump may lose, but they'll keep the Senate, and then they'll, so they won't be able to push through a lot of the other things. Or Trump may win, they may lose the Senate. Of course, that'll be fine. If they lose the Senate, then Trump gets impeached, like on day 3 of his second term. Or if they keep the House, they keep the House and they lose, they keep the Senate, or the Republicans keep the Senate, Democrats keep the House, Trump's there. You mix those together, and you're going to have a lot of tumultuous nothings for the next 4 years. But I will say this: this is kind of like the unlooked thing in this mix. I've been reading books by James Rickard, Road to Ruin, Aftermath, and I went backwards and I picked up his A New Case for Gold, and looking a lot of the data in there about the over leverage of all the banks, the derivatives, and the amount of money that the feds have, not money, printed for buying things. Their balance sheet it's outrageously high, historically high, and the collapse of the world money system, which some are calling the Great Reset, the negative Great Reset, will appear on the 2nd and the 3rd for sure. So if you have a mismatch of what's going on, if Trump doesn't clearly win, it looks like you'd have the crash of the stock market and all these things, and you start to collapse the money system. And of course, if Trump loses and they gain the whole House and all that, the money policy they'll have will be terrible, and you have potential wars now back in Syria and Russia, and it's just terrible. But in 2 or 3, you're going to have this money system collapse. And number one, what happens too, if Trump wins, everything looks good, and it could, unless something is made to deal with this. Just by stopping wars, that kind of stuff could save a lot of money, not to mention lives. And that could be a financial boon in such way. I'm not going to even go into it here on it. I'm not qualified, not even read up enough to even be an armchair quarterback. But that is also looming above all of this. I mean, the stock market is not worth anything near it is. It'd be like if I had a pen and I said, this pen's worth $1,000. You go, okay, and you buy it. What's the reason it's worth $100,000? Is it belong to a certain person? Can you prove it? It's a certain. Is it gold plated or solid gold? I mean, there's got to be some value to it to give it $1,000, other than me just saying it. And basically, what is happening in the stock market is that people are just believing in this non-existent value and giving it the value. Basically saying it'll be worth. I say it's $1,000. It'll be worth even more later on. It'll catch up. The actual worth will catch up with the price, which, come on, unless you have some unfamous artist painting, and then obviously becomes famous and dies. Yeah, okay, fine. But there's a reason there. You just didn't say it's worth it. So when you have all these things going on, it's the stakes are quite high. Oh my God. The stakes are absolutely quite high. And that's why it's very upsetting. I mean, I have never been this stressed out. Now, I of course, believe in God, and there's a mechanism around all of this that will end up good at some point. I mean, the structure of the universe compels God's desires to fruition. It's I shouldn't say compels it. I mean, it's not like it takes its arm and, like arm wrestles there. It's just that it's like the flow of the river takes you down the river. And if you go along with it or even fight up against it, eventually it helps you carry down again. You have the free will to get out of the river or paddle up, but just the natural flow of things tend to go to what's right. And so even if things get really bad and nasty here, it's going to turn for the best in the long run. Just those of us in the short run aren't going to have it too good. And if I could spend a minute here talking about the plan and popcorn and all that stuff, if I hear that stuff again, because so many things have fallen apart, and then you have people saying uh, the rapture will come. Now, I hope it does, and believe me, I'm not saying it doesn't exist and all that. I just don't know if it's the way it's being presented. If Shortwave Kitty is in the chat room, she said that. I presume I don't know. It's been a while since you listened live, and welcome back live. So I don't. That's the thing is there's a saying in that book that I read that I like a lot. It sums my outlook. I'd rather be mostly right or in the ballpark right than absolutely wrong. Because if you're in the ballpark right, you can always, as more information comes in, you can always kind of move around. You can move to the left, a little bit right. You can, go up and down. That's where I want to be because I'm not arrogant enough to think that I had figured it out. But I think that given the brains that I have through the genetic lottery, any kind of gifts of understanding spiritually, that if I apply things openly, honestly, try to check out my biases, I can get into ballpark maybe, and that's kind of what I'm going for here. I got a ballpark look at what could happen. There's always something can come in like way out of left field and screw up the mix. So when I talk about this is where I see we're at now, what I know now, right? We're going down this path, and given the issues at hand now, this is what I see now. I think it's a reasonable outlook. I mean, a reasonable assessment. So when you get in these end time scenarios that's been talked about, is laid out in the Bible, that kind of formula, what you do tend to have is people get very haughty and arrogant, and then you have something happening, coming from left field and just shock everybody. That's kind of the thing where I see God involved. Not that he's sending this in. You see, my view of God in the big picture is that at the beginning, he put everything in motion. If we understand the greatness of God and knowing the amazing knowingness of him, he puts it all in motion. And I guess he sits back with the popcorn and enjoys. And the people make their choices. And the goal of this world is to make us understand the rightness like God and choose that natively by our choices. So it's not that he wants to make us do what he says. He wants us to grow up and mature into in our ratio of abilities compared to God's infinite. He wants us to grow into that mold, being our own little special person, but still the principles will be there that we will choose naturally, natively. We will choose to do good things, the right things, because we understand it and it's become part of our ideas. Like if you know that if you touch a hot stove, you'll burn yourself. When you do touch the hot stove, or you come close enough, or you watch somebody who has burned their hands, you can then incorporate in your own idea the rightness of not touching a hot stove. And that's a good thing, because if you kept doing it, you would eventually, maybe lose your hand, you maybe even die from infection, or, and it's unpleasant, So this is the whole idea of sin, is that these choices lead to a negative, problematic systems. And so God wants the right thing. So when we're sitting at this point now, it looks like, from the mainstream perspective, that all the bad guys have won. They've cheated, lied, stealed. They totally ignored the Hunter laptop, the Wiener laptop. It's coming out now. It's not been official. It's coming out that Durham is going to close his thing. So all of that Spygate got taken care of. It looks like they're all going to win. So this is where I start to look, the other way. I used the example before when you're driving a truck, you see deer go out into the road. You don't follow the deer that's out there. You look where it came from because when there's one, there's many usually. So you want to look to see is any more coming out that and slow down to react. So when the pompous, arrogant, and they get drunken in their own the idolatry of themselves and do all this stuff, they start doing stupid things and all that. When that starts to happen, I start to kind of look around and go, okay, start looking from the left and the right, looking for that thing to come out in left field. And that's kind of just me, though. That's kind of how I figure how it works with God. Now, it still might get bad. Now, if you listen to my show last week, I talked about the prophecy of the two witnesses, and I kind of made a case for Trump Pence being in that mold, or that what do I call it? It doesn't mean that it is the two witnesses in the end times. It could be, but I'm not saying it is. It could still be like a principle, a system, a cycle that they're fitting in. And so it could, and also if you read in Revelation, the descriptions there, it's never been this bad for, since the whole time on earth. And it's not that bad here yet. So there should be more to come here. It doesn't mean he's going to win and solve everything and all be all happy, which I would like that, and hopefully it does. But it could mean also it's going to get worse, and it's going to be more of us stepping up and living to our faith and to what Jesus' teachings, etc. That could be the point of this, and so that those who are persecuted and may suffer will be rewarded. Those who make the stand will also stand more secure in their own understanding of the universe through God, and so we have to look at God. He's got this big picture perspective. What I like about Jesus being alive on the earth is that you have the divine through him, in however that works out, experiencing firsthand spiritual the human experience. It's kind of like one thing to plant it on the outside and another thing to live it on the inside. So that's why I kind of like that whole idea about the divine in Jesus. And again, I don't know the whole mechanism and what that is, but it's like that God knows what it's like to be a human, and God's love with his own personal knowledge of how the universe works, because being a creator, and also how it feels being inside a human. And I think that he's inside of all of us, perhaps nowhere as completely as with Jesus, but we still have that divine spark in our souls. So you got to understand, you have a person who's working in the big picture and the little picture at the same time, all of it working out for the highest, best good of all involved. That's pretty tall order, but that's God. And so when I'm talking about these things, like last week about the two witnesses, and this week I'm talking about what the two choices I'm seeing here now, I'm sharing my assessment of these things. He's come to mind for me for some reason, so I share them. But it also is, it doesn't mean it's going to be rosy, but I'm not saying that like just to cover myself, right? Just in case. Because, again, it all works out good in the end. It's just I don't know where the end is exactly. It could get a little messy before it gets there. And that's why I want to encourage people that, I looked in the chat room, yes, Shortwave Kitty is a she. Well, it sounds like a feminine name, but, I guess a man would say shortwave cat. I guess. I don't know. Anyway, welcome to the live. Yeah, years ago I did. I've been doing this for 18 years. So years ago, the live show was the thing. I mean, bandwidth was rare, was hard to get of. And I, in my earlier shows, I only keep a couple up, and I have to cycle them over because it cost way too much money. And live was the thing. Well, now, even with TV, live is nothing. Now we can listen to it at any time you want by just downloading it. And that's fine. And I do. I have the download. You can download it. When I'm done here, it'll upload on YouTube and then over to BitChute. And that's fine. But it's also nice to know I'm talking to somebody like right now instead of talking to myself. But anyway, let me go back to my notes. which is now I know lost it. Oh, here it is. Right. Oh, I did the money. That's the money thing. That's why, so according to Rickards, and I like his idea, and if you recall, I have had Lionel Parkinson on here talking about how cash will be king in the initial moments of the crash. Well, Rickards agrees. It's just what Lionel's talking about is letting gold fall at the initially. I'm not going to go into all the details of why it would, and then it'll rise again. No, so you buy it on the down, keeping the cash handy. Rickards thinks that you won't be able to buy gold because all the big shots will be buying it, so the little guys won't be able to get it. And I tend to agree with that. So what in keeping with this this crash, which is so inevitable, I don't know how it cannot crash. Put it that way, is to keep 10% of your liquid assets. That does not mean your house or your business, but your actual investable money, or just if you have just money in the bank, whatever that is, 10% of that in gold, like buy gold coins or gold and silver. Gold in particular, because it's going to go up higher. Silver might be better to keep, too, for purchasing in a crash. So a mix of it. 10% in gold, 30% in cash, and then the rest of it you can try and invest. And he gives a bunch of stuff for invest. Well, I can't go there. The cash part is where I had stopped. And so the idea is to have gold and cash for the initial crash, because having the physical dollars will be king, because the credit cards and ATMs and all that will be turned off. At least this is the model that is most likely in the biggest big enough crash. So you won't be able to buy anything. Even if you had money in the bank, the digital money will be frozen. So have cash with you as well, and then gold is there to get you through this to whatever the money system will be on the other side. Gold will always retain its value. So this way, if your dollars end up going, 100 to 1 in the new currency, your gold will go up many more times than that. So that in the new currency, gold will be a lot higher. Therefore, you'll save your money. It's gold is made as a preservative of money, of wealth, not making money. That's where the problem comes in. It doesn't do good at making money because it is money. It's its own thing. So when the dollar collapses or not, when the ruble or yen, gold will always be something that'll be worth in that system. So I bring that up now, and you can look up the articles, the things I did with Lionel Parkinson. If you go to YouTube, best way to do it, go to YouTube. There's a channel I have, or a playlist just of Lionel stuff, and you can check it out. Also, if you look up for James Rickards, he's done a lot of interviews as well. Yeah. Sorry, if Kitty's saying she's got sterling silver jewelry. Yes. In fact, in gold and silver, all that matters is the gold and silver, because when it comes down to this new system of trying to live through this crash, the art part of it doesn't matter. Well, I have a freshly minted 1 ounce gold coin, and I have a ancient gold coin that was found from a treasure ship from the Romans' time, right? Well, in a civilized world with no problems, that other coin will be worth more because of the emotional, romantic attachment to the history of the coin. But in the collapse, it's going to be the gold, the weight of gold, and that alone, it's going to speak. So if you're going to be buying gold and silver for preserving wealth, you would buy let's call it the cheapest kind, which would be average silver. When you get older coins, they're mixed with nickel, but people know this. That's what's nice about the coins. It's all known that if you have old American junk silver coins, well, there's so much nickel in them, right? So they know this, so they can calculate the value of the silver of those coins rather easily. And gold plated, silver plated, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. So if you find actual real silverware All right. There's other things in it other than silver, but to a metallurgist, they could melt that down, extract out the actual silver and make coins from it or bars or whatever. So jewelry and silverware and all that is worth something. Old U.S. coins, the silver nickels and quarters, again, not pure silver, but it has a lot of silver in there. And again, its value is way more than the face value of it. I actually looked it up once and was shocked that a roll of quarters was like $5, and it's, I don't know, now it's like a couple $100. And I've lived through that. I used to have silver quarters like we're normal. So to actually see it go to this level, it's like, wow, I wish I would have saved those quarters. Actually, my mom did have a huge collection from her father, my grandfather, and stuff that she collected as herself, just kept it in a drawer. And at one point, somebody broke in her house and robbed them. So a lot of silver dollars. And they'd be worth like, $25 a piece now, $23, $24 a piece. They were $1. Let you know how bad the money system is. So that's something I would be looking at now. I mean, you can buy and store food in case there's a shutdown. We're talking about this COVID stuff. It's not the COVID shutdown I'm thinking of. It's the, monetary shutdown. But the COVID stuff could actually help lead to it. But you could buy food and all that. But the Lionel Parkinson aspect of it is if you have the cash, the food prices will drop because no one will be able to buy it. Therefore, the prices go down, and then you could buy it. So you could try that. I just get a little nervous that when the time comes, there won't be anything to buy. So maybe you want to do both. That's what I'm doing anyway, for the little part that I am. So I guess in kind of summing up, the two forks in the road are really different. And what history has shown, usually you don't get a pure result. Maybe I'll read it again in case somebody came into this. Trump's, number one, the two options, plus that third I'll get to. Trump's contesting the election, wins, proving massive multi-level fraud, and gains a second term. This may also turn the House and keep the Senate, as the fraud is uncovered going into the House and Senate races. This will unleash the anti-Kraken, and I explained that anti-Kraken meaning going back to Sidney Powell saying she's going to release the Kraken on about the fraud. This will release the BLM and Antifa as the war goes hot, and they will become America's insurgents. Trump brings in a new era of people around him in his cabinet to end foreign wars. Corruption is rooted out and jailed. The medical tyranny is ended with Fauci and others being replaced. The wall gets finished. Migration reforms passes. America wins. China loses. The second option is Trump loses the fraud case and the Senate runoffs, leaving a president, Senate, and House full-blown socialist. They will add extra states, Puerto Rico, D.C., to gain more senators and a bigger a bigger majority. They will add Supreme Court justices to the bench so that they will turn the court, and the power will be sealed along with this perfected voter fraud for the foreseeable future. The Trump supporters will be marked, shunned, and perhaps rounded up, and the patriots who will fight back they'll become the new American insurgents. Basically, the Republicans will be controlled opposition just to make it look good for show. The medical attorney expands, the wall is torn down, mass immigration and amnesty, Americans lose, China wins. So those are my two diametrically opposed actual possibilities. Now, these are possible. There's a third, more probable, lackluster, tumultuous mix of the above, none leading to any unity or peace. So you may have, Trump winning, losing the Senate, and then now they're trying to impeach him, or he keeps the Senate, but then the House is still there, and they'll impeach him every other week, and they can't get nothing done. They won't approve things, Or Biden wins, but then there's the Republican Senate, and they block things, and all this other stuff. It's just a total mess. And then I just got done talking about the money. The collapse of the world money system will appear in the second or third for sure, and one if changes aren't made to the deal with the overwhelming debt. So that's my real cheerful message, isn't it? But again, overarching over that is that this is in some kind of a planned system with God. Again, my understanding of God, far be it for me to claim I understand God, but my understanding of God is that God does not directly intervene in space and time, much anyway. It's more of a pre-planned thing where he rolls the bowling ball eons ahead of time and times it so that when the bowling alley is built and the door happens to be open at that certain time, the ball will roll in the door down the alley into the make a strike. I mean, that's how I look at God, how it works. So no matter how dark it gets or how bad it is, the picture is that it will work. There's one of my favorite movies, The Ten Commandments. It has been since I was a kid. It still is. I watch it. I love it. It's just awesome. And was one scene where Moses, Charlton Heston, is out in the slaves trying to figure out why, he found out he's Hebrew and he wanted to know, why since he became, all of a sudden he's Hebrew, it's now bad. He's the same person, right? He's out in the fields working with the slaves trying to find the truth, trying to find out answers. Why? And there was an old man there who ends up mouthing off to the slave masters. He ends up getting some kind of an axe in his gut, and he's laying there dying in Moses' arms. And he's like, "Oh, that's okay, My only regret is that I prayed to God that I would see our deliverer before I die." And then he dies. Well, he did see the deliverer, but it's Moses was standing there, right? Even though Moses didn't know he was deliverer, that even though I know that's fiction, that's a movie, but that to me is kind of like the God working. So I have a personal request with God. I've prayed many times. I don't pray a lot with it. You only need to pray it like seriously once, but I have a couple times that I want to see God in the flesh with my human eyes. Now, I've had people saying, "Well, don't you understand that God is within you? Of course, He's with you all the time." And yeah, I got that. But I'm thinking of the stories of Moses who met God face to face. Now, I'm not saying I deserve it. I'm not saying that I can even handle it or whatever, I'm just thinking, from my point, the coolest thing that I could think of is being able to see God enter space and time, however it can be. I don't know how that would be. I mean, God's obviously too big to fit here, if you know what I mean. And I look at it because something Less Visible said, the dog poet, who's been on the show many, many times. I got links to all his stuff since he's been on here. He's still writing, of course, still talking. But he said once, and it was it really choked me up, that man is searching for his God, but his dog has already found him. And that's how a dog looks at their human keeper. The dog looks at him with all the love and care of, this is my God. He provides for me. He gives me food, shelter, love. I love my master. I will die for him. I will, if somebody breaks in the house, I will die trying to save them. It has this beautiful, it doesn't matter what you look like. You're pretty, you're skinny, you're fat, you're missing an arm. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. You're alive. That's what matters. With that kind of thinking, I would love to be able to be the dog finding my God. And it may be soon. Anyway, I'll leave you with that. And we'll see you next week if God wills, I guess, allows or what have you. And who knows what's going to happen between now and then. The way things are going now, it's just speeding up amazingly. So take care. God bless. And we'll see you next time. It's unbelievable times to live in. Hang on to the promises and give God.
Oh, my old friend, the one who walked before, the one who walk again, the ancient one of old, with wisdom for the new. Revive our inner sight, retell your timeless truths. Oh, ancient one.
Feet to Fire is a production of IPS Media Works on the OnSync Radio network of stations.